Before I crack on with today's vid, just got a couple of announcements to make. First one is I'm still running a competition and the closing date's going to be 1st or 2nd of December, where for every monthly Patreon subscription or virtual coffee that's bought using the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description, that'll count as entry into a raffle where the winner will get to choose between a selection of pieces that I've made this year. So that's the first one. Secondly, after a long wait, Dave Smith's online courses are now available to register for. Now, if you're not familiar with Dave, he's the best reverse glass artist in the world, and I did his course back in 2015, and it's absolutely amazing. Such a good bloke, such a good course, and the online course is a lot less than the in-person course, and I think it's about 50 hours worth of tutorials, so absolute bargain, and, learning from the very best. So anyway, that's my two announcements. Let's crack on with it. If you're a subscriber to the channel or have even just seen a few of my videos, you'll have probably heard my opinion that the most beautiful effect you can achieve in reverse glass is by gilding acid etched glass. Now, the problem with that is that hydrofluoric acid isn't readily available, and rightfully so, it's really dangerous. So I've done some videos on some alternatives using sort of etching cream that you can buy on Amazon. I'll put a link to those up here. But again, this isn't available in every country and it's still dangerous. Some people don't want to work with these things. So the technique I'm going to be covering today isn't dangerous, doesn't require any sort of hazardous chemicals, but you can achieve a very similar effect to acid etching. But before I crack on, I just want to announce that this particular video is funded by the Heritage Crafts. Heritage Crafts are a charity that are all about preserving old crafts like the one I'm doing, which is reverse glass sign painting. I'm going to put a link to them in the description. You should definitely check them out. Also, if you're a fan of reverse glass sign painting, gilding, digital processes and much more, then you're in the right place because that's what this channel's about, and I try to release a video every couple of weeks. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. Buy me a coffee. There's also a link to the Facebook group, which is over 1,000 people now, all sort of sharing ideas and helping each other out. So anyway, right, that out of the way, let's crack on with it. Right, so just a little explanation of what the process is here and what the technique is. And the idea is we're going to use a kind of really clear, thick medium and paint it on the glass and then put our own patterns in it manually. Now, one shout out that I forgot at the beginning is to Hand Over Brushes and Irregular Signs, who have already done a video on this process that I'll put in the description. It's brilliant. You should definitely check it out. I'm not in any way trying to remake their video. I'm sort of going to be carrying on from what they did. So more of a sort of fan-made sequel than a remake. But I certainly wouldn't be able to do this having not seen that video. So thanks, guys. It was absolutely awesome. So the materials I'm going to be using are the same ones in their video to start with. I'm then going to kind of move on and experiment with some other stuff. But I'll also put a link in the description to the products that are the substitute products that you'd probably need to buy outside of the UK. So I'm going to bring this camera down now. Right, so I'm going to be working with the same products that are used in the handover video, and that is One Shot UV Clear. Now when you buy this, it'll say it can be called UV Acrylic Clear. It's not acrylic. So the only reason I mention that is because you're going to be using a brush and you'll want to be using white spirit to clean your brushes after using this. The other one is this gel called Gloss Gel Medium. You can see that's not clear and it's not, it's got a colour to it, but once that's mixed and diluted, you're not going to see that. Now, this is a UK product. The US equivalent, there's a Weber's Resin Gel, which I'll put a link to in the description, which is, I think any form of gel is going to be fine, because all you're doing is making it so that it's firmer. This stuff is going to dry quickly. This stuff is going to make it so you can sort of create a pattern in it. Now, the ratio I'm going to be using is 2:1, with the 2 parts UV clear, 1 part gel. And the reason being, the trial and error bits I've done, I'm sort of, because it doesn't dry 100% clear, the less of this you have in, the better, but you obviously need an amount of this in there to hold your shape. So I'm going to be pretty accurate with the measurements, and that's because I want to be able to rely on those measurements next time when I'm just going to be creating a piece. So, take a pipette of this. That's a stupid way of doing it, wasn't it? Why didn't I pour that in there? Right, okay, I'll do that then. Okay, so that's what I've got at the moment. Right, quite gooey, but easy enough to sort of paint on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint all of these squares, and then I'm going to leave it a set time in between them before I sort of make the pattern. That's going to tell me how long I need it to sort of cure for. Because the thing is, if you paint it straight on and then start swirling around a pattern, that gel won't have, or well, the two won't have combined to go hard enough yet, and then that'll just sort of fall out. And, you know, you really want this to be not far off something that's like almost a sort of glue-like texture. No, it needs to flow, but it sort of also does need to have some resistance against what you're sort of pulling through it. So let's just start by applying it. Now, thickness is important as well. Like, when I say apply it thick, I don't mean thick like so that it's like a puddle. I mean sort of how you'd apply a thick layer of paint. The thicker this is, the more opaque it's going to be. Because like I say, this won't dry 100% transparent like that. So the thinner you can get it, the better, because the more transparent it will be. What I'm doing as well here, which is another important thing because of that, is the area that you're going to do the embossing on, make sure you're going right to the edge. So in this case, you know, I've got these really simple blocks that I've cut out, but yeah, you don't want to be doing a section and then having some sort of clear glass around it unless you've mastered off that clear glass, because there will be a kind of gradient in terms of the bits that are completely transparent and the bits that will sort of be a bit hazy from where it dries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and do the first set of patterns on there. So just set my timer, and we'll come back and see what happens. Right, so let's get started on the pattern for the first one. So what you can use is, well, anything that's going to create a pattern. So in the handover tutorial, they use the end of a brush. You can use things like cocktail stick, comb, plastic fork, you know, so it's really just to create something that's a uniform pattern. So I'm going to start using a comb and using just a kind of swirling pattern going along here like that. So just start here. So, I don't know if you can see that, but that is already starting to just sink back into that. So you make the pattern and then all of a sudden it's just too wet, it's not setting. So 5 minutes is no good for this. So what I'm going to do now is set it for another 5 minutes and then come back and try again. Okay, coming up to 10 minutes, I realised that camera angle probably wasn't very good, so I've moved it and hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit clearer now. So I've got 5 seconds left, just cancel that, and then let's get in there. Right, another 5 minutes. Let's see how that goes. Right, 15 minutes. Cancel that. I'll show you what these look like a little bit closer. Hope you can see that. You can see that first one, that pattern just fell out of that. Second one actually looks alright, that's holding its own, you know, just about. And yeah, this one started to get really tacky on the 15 minutes. So I think probably 15 minutes is the one to go with. But we'll see. See what 20 minutes is like. And then obviously see what it's like once we apply gold leaf, because that's all that matters, is what it looks like when it's gilded. Alright, last one, 20 minutes. So you can see you have got an alright amount of time to work with this. I mean, if you're doing a larger piece, you'd want to, you know, kind of do it a letter at a time or a few letters at a time or something like that. But, you know, 20 minutes to, or 15 to 20 minutes anyway, to get something done like this, which is pretty straightforward, is a decent amount of time, I reckon. Right, I'm just going to leave them to dry, and they're going to take a few hours to dry, and don't let what they look like now fool you. Now, at the moment, I'd be thinking, yeah, that's the one to go with. It looks like there's so much more sort of contours and stuff like that. But, like I said, this stuff doesn't dry 100% clear, so I'm fully expecting that to have some sort of cloudy areas in it, you know. So I think it's going to be one of these two, which is going to be the better one to go with, but we'll see. Okay, so while I'm waiting for those to dry, I just thought I'd paint another few squares and then just experiment with some different patterns. I'm just going to be using the comb again. I've got the sort of thin end of the comb as well. So just starting, you know, let's do something a little bit more geometric, I suppose. Probably better with someone not so shaky as me. Oh man. That is not right. So I wanted them to be straight lines, but there we go. So that's got the sort of little patterns in between, because if I just done that as squares like that, the bits in between would be that sort of cloudy texture. So I just wanted to do a sort of cross board, but then with the sort of little squiggles in between. Let's try something here that's a little bit more fluid. That might be quite cool. This one looks like it might be not quite as dry as that one up there, but I'm going to do the same with this thin comb here. That's cool, that's almost like that sort of guilloche, if that's how you pronounce it, pattern. Let's have a look at these. Oh, and see how they come out, eh? Okay, so I've left that to dry overnight. Let's have a look at it. So you can see from that first one that, you know, firstly it didn't hold its shape, but secondly you can see it's like cloudy, and that's where it sort of thickens up. So you want to keep that as thin as you can. And even on the second one, that was 10 minutes. You can see it's starting to fall apart a bit, and in those bits you're getting that cloudiness. So it's this really, I mean, 15, 20 minutes, they both look really good. You know, they both sort of got specular highlights on them, which means that they're going to catch light when they're gilded. So similar, looking at some of the patterned ones that are made, that is cloudy in parts. Now, I mean, this isn't, you know, something where you're like, I can't use it, it's cloudy. You know, you think of glue chip glass, and there are areas of that are etched, and areas that are sort of, you know, where the glue's chipped it that catch the light better, and they still look nice gilded. But, you know, the more of these areas that aren't cloudy, the better. So in this case, that was the same. I think just because the patterns were too thick that I was using, but when I used the kind of thin one, that looks pretty cool. You know, I think that was with the sort of fine end of the comb, so I'd definitely be using something like that again. So that's the kind of results overall from what I've done. So I'm just going to gild them and then show you what that looks like. Then we'll move on to a bit more experimentation. Right, so I'm set up to gild now. I'm going to be using 12 carat white gold leaf. And that's because that's all I've got left at the moment. The money that I got through from the Heritage Craft Fund, which came through today, I've just ordered a load of gold leaf because videos, what I've agreed to make, will require a lot of it, but I haven't had that delivery yet. So I'm just going to use white gold leaf, but it's not going to make any difference to the effect. I'm not going to do this as a gilding tutorial either because I've done quite a few gilding tutorials, so there'll be a link at the top right of the screen or in the description as well to any number of water gilding tutorials. So one thing about this, the sort of finish, the Dammar varnish finish, is this dries hard, but it doesn't dry in the sense that it can't be scratched. So really what you want to be doing is handling it as little as possible before gilding it, so I leave it to dry with a kind of netting type cake cover over it, and so no dust gets on it, and then I'll pretty much, that was yesterday and I'm ready to gild it today. So right, and I'm going to be gilding the ones which are a little bit cloudy. I'll gild all of them just because I wanted to see what the kind of result is. Because in some cases, like I said, it works. It's just, the clearer the better, really. And like with most gilding, when you're sort of gilding a surface that's not completely flat, use your cotton wool to kind of push that up into the kind of textured areas as well. So I'll do the rest of this as a time lapse, and then we'll get looking at the results. So that's the basics of Dammar embossing. It's a really easy process. It's quite relaxing in the sense of you haven't really got to rush through something. There are some processes where your chemicals can go off or your paint's starting to dry when you're doing something, so you've got to work fast. This, I don't think, is one of those cases. I think, you can just take your time with it. If you don't like the pattern you've made, you'll be able to go over it and do a different one and sort of work with it for a little while. So, yeah, a really lovely kind of outcome, really easy to do. And although the sort of although the materials and stuff like this are quite expensive, that is a big old tub and that will last a long time. I was using the tiniest little bit. I think for this I used 10 mil and there's still all that left. And if you put a lid on it, that'll be fine. You don't have to throw away the stuff that you mix that you don't use. So overall, it's a lot cheaper than anything like acid etching or anything like that, and obviously much safer. But I want to see if we can achieve the same effect with some different things, that being epoxy. Now, I've used epoxy before and I don't really like it. I love the effect, I love the outcome. It's like really clear, solid, but it's a nightmare to work with. It's so sticky. It's a difficult substance to get off things. So I'm going to be mixing it. I'm not going to be using my brushes because I don't think I'd ever be able to clean them. So if this works and becomes a viable method, you'll just have to look into what the sort of epoxy ratios are with the brand that you buy. So what I mean by that is you have your mix and there'll be the epoxy and the hardener, and you have to combine the two, and the different brands will have a different ratio to mix together. So I'm not going to go through the kind of real details that we've just been through. So I'm going to time lapse through a similar process, which will be mixing the epoxy, applying it, putting the timer on, and then trying some patterns and stuff like that. So let's see how this comes out. Might work, might not. Right, so just to give you an update, we're coming up on 1 hour. So, you know, this was completely experimental. I hadn't tried this before, but obviously we're going to need a lot more time for the epoxy than we are for the previous Dammar mix. So let's see what it's like at an hour. So that's not going to hold, but that has thickened up considerably from when I first did it. So I'm certainly not ruling this out. It's probably going to have limited applications in terms of, you know, some of these things you're going to be doing vertically. You know, if you're doing this on a window, you're not going to be able to just sit there for hours and wait for something to set, because it won't, it'll just run off. But if you're working flat, I've still got hope that this is going to be an option. And then even further, I've got some other experiments to do further than this, well, beyond this. So we'll see. But what I'm going to do, I won't bother with the time lapse. I'm just going to do this another half an hour and then do it in half-hour intervals and see what we come out with. Okay, so to say that took a little bit longer would be an understatement. That got to about 5 hours and then it started to sort of hold its own. So I came back every half an hour, but I do think it's worth experimenting with because the results are really nice. You know, it's got the sort of much smoother and softer feel to it, and you can kind of, you know, work with a thicker sort of resin just simply because you're not going to get cloudy areas. The resin is always going to be completely clear. So I think that's really decent. And, you know, we'll see what it looks like when it's gilded. But if that turns out nice, I've got another idea what I think will be pretty cool. So see how that goes. So the epoxy works. Takes bloody ages, and you know, I could see why someone would think, why would I do something that takes 5 hours when I can do something that takes 15 minutes? And I completely get that. There is a slightly different result to it. You know, I think it's softer and more fluid. So it just depends if you'll think that's a worthwhile thing to do. But I didn't really use the epoxy because I wanted to see what it would look like as a sort of direct comparison. I was using it because I wanted to see if something else worked. And that is by using sort of silicone template sheets on it. Now, because the epoxy dries clear, no matter how thick it is, doesn't matter if something like this is sort of 2 mil thick, that should be clear at the surface and at the 2 mil depth. So this is just a baking sheet. It's silicone. It's for like making sort of icing things that go around cakes or sort of chocolate fancy things. So what I'm going to do, I've prepped a little mirror, sandblasted the back, and then I'm just going to cover it with epoxy, and then I'm going to lay this over it, and I'm going to leave that to dry, and then see what sort of result we get from that. Right, so I've left that for 48 hours. Usually epoxy's workable in 24 hours, but there's still a little bit of give in it, and then if you sort of mess around with it, you can make the sort of clear areas cloudy, so best to be safe. One thing I probably should have said at the beginning of this video is you're probably, or possibly, going to learn as much in the comments as you are from this actual video. And the reason I say that is because this is a new process to me, the whole Dammar embossing thing. You know, I always acid etch glass, so I've never seen the reason to sort of learn this until I had the channel and I wanted to do a video on it. So there's going to be people out there who've done this who are better than I am, who will probably have figured out how to fix things like the sort of cloudiness around the thick varnish. So certainly my word isn't gospel. I'm sort of showing you my experience with this process based on reading it in books and using the handover video. So there's probably, like I say, there's probably going to be people who know a lot more who will be able to sort of comment on what I'm doing wrong. So Anyway, let's have a look at how this came out. So the pattern looks pretty cool. Just have to see what that looks like from the other side. So there you go. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with how even I got it, considering it was a bit sort of haphazard the way I applied the vinyl sheet or the silicone sheet. But yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's see what that looks like gilded. The other thing is what you can do with epoxy, which you can't really do with the other stuff, is if there are cloudy areas, you can buff this, you can polish it with a cutting compound and sort of like, an orbital sander with a sort of sponge on it. So if there are areas that aren't perfectly clear, you can make them clear. So anyway, let's see what that looks like gilded. So that turned out pretty well, I think. You have to use a fair bit of gold just because of pushing it in. It was quite deep, that design. But you can get loads of different types. I got that one off Amazon. It was about £6 or something like that. But what I was thinking as well, what I would have liked to have done for this video had I not sort of run out of time, is using the laser and the kind of rubber stamp material that you can get, you could sort of engrave your own designs in it. So I've made some rubber stamps before, and it's really, really hardy, that stuff. So in the laser, the settings I use for that are stronger than I would use for oak, and it doesn't, cut as deep as that. So you could do some really nice sort of intricate patterns of your own, and on that rubber stamp material, emboss that into the back of some epoxy on the back of some glass. So just another idea. And I think, I'll come up with loads more, but in the end, got to stop somewhere. So I'm going to wrap this for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and click the little thumbs up icon, and please share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. So till next time, cheers.